Let's go imagining together to a place so old it's always new. We'll tell a tale, my friends, to you, and share a smile before we're through, and share a smile before we're through. Bum 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 bum.
When I was a real little boy, I used to be very frightened of Halloween because when the kids would come to the door, all I could see were real pirates, real ghosts, real monsters. See, I was too little then to understand that what's on the outside isn't always what's on the inside. Well, today's story is about an Indian woman who sees something that's very frightening and very real.
At least on the outside.
Today's story is called The Chenoo. Once in the northern forests, there was a Micmac Indian brave named Teon. He had left his traps and his hunting grounds to marry Mimku, who lived with her aging parents. Teon made a promise to Mimku's parents that he would take care of them for so long as they lived. Then he asked permission to take Mimku to his home. For 3 days, the happy young couple walked through the forest to Teon's wigwam. It was big and neat and clean, just like Teon himself. Teon showed Mimku all about the wigwam, and in one corner he showed her a bag made of skin. You must never touch that bag, for if you do, terrible things will happen. Everything in this wigwam now belongs to you to do with as you wish. Only promise me you will never, ever touch this bag. Mimku was puzzled, but she wanted to please Teon. She promised to never touch the bag. For many months, Mimku and Teon lived happily, and every 7 days, Teon walked to Mimku's parents' wigwam to care for their needs. He was a perfect son-in-law, and always took them extra things such as new moccasins, a new blanket, and nuts and berries from the fields. When Teon was away, Mimku worked about the wigwam. She was careful never to touch the skin bag. She worked in the clearing around the wigwam, cutting firewood, planting gourds and beans, and washing clothes in the nearby stream. One day, after Mimku and Teon had been married almost 2 years, Teon returned home to find Mimku holding a baby boy. She was smiling. "Look at our son. He was born yesterday." Teon smiled and kissed Mimku. "What a wonderful homecoming surprise. Now we are a family." They named the boy Wasis and said, "He will be a big, strong brave someday, and he will be a hunter. I must take him to meet his grandparents." So the next time Teon went to see Mimku's parents, he took Wasis with him. Mimku's parents were delighted to have a grandson. "He will be a fine hunter," said Grandfather. For Wasis, Grandfather made a little bow and several arrows. "See that he learns to shoot the arrows straight and true." And Wasis did. By the time he was 3 years old, he was already quite accurate with his bow and arrow. He shot his arrows into trees around the clearing. He was proud of the little bow and arrows and knew that his father and mother were pleased with him. One day, Wasis was inside the wigwam with Mimku. Teon was away helping Mimku's parents. Mimku was sewing new moccasins, and Wasis was bored. He picked up his bow and arrow and said, "Look, Mother," and he shot an arrow into the skin bag. Mimku gasped. She had told Wasis never to touch the bag. Now she looked with horror at the arrow sticking into the bag. Everything became quiet, very quiet. Mimku ran out into the clearing. The crows and the jays had all flown away. The squirrels had all run away. The trees were still. Everything was still and quiet. And then she heard a footstep. And then another. And another. They grew louder. Then whole trees were crashing, and the thundering footsteps nearly deafened Mimku. Suddenly into the clearing stepped a huge, hideous monster, a Chenoo. Mimku's heart froze. She knew the Chenoo had come to kill her and Wasis and eat them. She could not bear to look at the Chenoo. It was half human, half beast. It stood staring at her with a look of cold hatred. Mimku thought quickly. She had only moments to save herself and her son. She ran toward the Chenoo, pretending to be cheerful. "Why, dear grandfather, where have you been so long? We have missed you. You must be tired." The Chenoo had never been spoken to. It seemed confused. Mimku kept on talking in a soothing voice. You look cold, grandfather. You've lost your clothes. Here, let's put my husband's blanket around you. She took a blanket from the drying pole and threw it around the Chenoo's shoulders. The Chenoo still looked at her with terrible anger and ferocity, but it did not strike her. You must be hungry. Oh, wait here, I'll get you some food. Mimku ran into the wigwam, and she whispered to Wasis, Quick, don't ask any questions, just do as I say. Go out from the back of the wigwam, do not look back. Run straight to the cave by the big river. Stay in the cave until I come for you. Wasis did as he was told. Mimku took some deer meat from the rafter and hurried back to the Chenoo. The Chenoo had not moved. She handed it the meat. It took the meat and without moving its eyes from hers, ate it. Oh, dear grandfather, you must be tired. Come into the wigwam. I have made a bed for you. She let the Chenoo inside. It sat down and continued to stare at her. Please, grandfather, try to rest. I will take care of you until you have your strength back. She made the Chenoo lie down. It nearly filled the wigwam. It was so big. After a while, it closed its eyes and slept. Mimku heard footsteps again, and this time they were Teom's. She rushed from the wigwam with her finger against her lips. Teom stopped and stared at Mimku. When Mimku drew closer to him, Teom knew that something terrible had happened. You've touched the bag. Yes, yes. Now the Chenoo will come. The Chenoo is here. Here. Yes, it's asleep in the wigwam. I have fed and clothed it and pretended it is human. I have even called it grandfather. You must do the same. Wasis is safe in the big cave. Teom was surprised at what he heard. He went cautiously into the wigwam. The Chenoo was still sleeping. Teom was proud of his wife's clever thinking. The next morning, the Chenoo rose and stepped across the wigwam. It picked up the axe. Mimku and Teom had slept just outside the wigwam, and when they awoke, they saw the Chenoo coming out of the wigwam with the axe. He is going to kill us now, whispered Teom. There was nothing they could do. There was nowhere to run. But the Chenoo walked past them to the edge of the clearing. It began chopping down trees. Soon the Chenoo came back with an armload of firewood and went back into the wigwam. When Mimku and Teom went into the wigwam, the Chenoo was sitting by the fire. It looked at them with a fierce expression. It did not move. Teom remembered what Mimku had told him. Grandfather, it is good to see you after all these years. While you were away, I have grown into a man. See, I have learned to hunt as you taught me. I have kept all the promises and learned the ways of our people. I hope you are pleased with me. The Chenoo looked confused, but the fierce scowl was disappearing from his ugly face. And so it went. Mimku and Teom talked to the Chenoo for several days. They used gentle words of reassurance, and gradually the Chenoo changed. By the end of the 7th day, it looked more like an old man than a Chenoo. On the 8th day, the Chenoo spoke. My children, I thank you. You have melted my heart of ice. You have drained the hatred from me. You have given me true life. Bring me the skin bag and I will give you something. Teom took the skin bag from the rafter. When a Chenoo killed my parents, it dropped the skin bag. I ran with it and hid it in the forest. I have never opened it, for the spirits told me if it was opened, the Chenoo would come back. That is true. Now I shall open it, for I must. He opened the bag and took out 2 knives, 1 gold, 1 silver. He handed the gold one to Teom. You might need this. Then the old man explained. Soon another Chenoo will come. It will be more terrible than anything you could imagine, for this Chenoo is more clever, more powerful than any Chenoo. He will be mad and furious and cruel. He and I will fight to the death of one of us. He will change his shape many times, and it will be almost impossible to get a hold on him. You, my children, must hide far away. You must cover your ears, for the scream of this Chenoo alone will kill a human being. Do not listen with your ears uncovered.
I do not know who will win the battle. It will be long and terrible. If you hear me call, "Come, my son," come quickly with the gold knife, for it is fire. My silver knife is ice. It will take both to kill the Chenoo, for he is made of ice. If I can pierce him with the silver knife, you need only touch him with the gold knife, and he will begin to melt. If we destroy him, there will be no more Chenoos. Teom and Mimku listened intently. They understood and were willing to do as the old man said. Several days later, the old man looked up from his seat by the fire. Ah, the wind is from the north. He will come today. I know this for certain. Go quickly to the cave and hide. Remember, cover your ears. Teom and Mimku ran to the cave, and there they found Wasis sleeping. Wake up, Wasis. Once again, do as you were told. Go to the very back of the cave, cover your ears, and wait for us to come for you. Wasis went from them to the very back of the cave. Teom and Mimku stayed near the mouth of the cave, and they watched the earth and the sky. They saw dark clouds gathering, and then the wind began to turn and swirl the clouds. And then with their ears covered, they heard a low growl begin. It grew and grew higher and louder until their ears ached. The cave shook and the trees trembled, and they knew the Chenoo was near. And then they saw the old man growing until he was just as big. The battle began. The old man and the Chenoo came together with such raging force that trees flew into the air. Everything was in motion. The earth shook. The screams were terrible. The old man thrust his arms into the Chenoo. He staggered and fell, and the Chenoo was immediately on top of him. Teom heard a call. "Come, my son!" He ran from the cave with the gold knife. He could only see parts of the old man as he thrashed upon the ground. "I am coming!" shouted Teom. He rushed to the old man's side. Riding above the old man was a dark, shapeless, hideous form. Teom thrust the gold knife into it. There was a scream, and fire burst from the dark form. Teom thrust the knife again and again, and each time the fire grew greater. He could not tell the old man's screams from those of the Chenoo. Everything seemed to be howling. The forest was on fire, and the battle went on. Teom followed as the old man and the Chenoo rolled in their death struggle. Huge sections of the forest were destroyed. Teom heard the old man shout, "Now!" Teom stuck his gold knife into the dark mass, and suddenly water swirled all about him. The Chenoo was melting. Round and round he swirled. It seemed forever. The water grew deeper. He lost sight of the old man, but he could hear his voice calling, "Hold on tight. Don't lose your knife. Hold on tight." Then Teom was on a beach. Beside him lay the old man. Behind him he saw the cave with Mimku and Wasis sitting, watching and waiting. He touched the old man, who seemed nearly dead. "Grandfather, we have won. The Chenoo is dead. See the beautiful water where none was before." The old man opened his tired eyes and gazed out upon a vast expanse of blue water. He smiled. "There will be no more Chenoos. We must throw our knives into the water now." The old man threw his silver knife into the water, and there were suddenly fish. Teom threw his gold knife into the water, and where it touched, the golden rays of the sun spread across the water, reaching to the sun itself. Teom and the old man walked to meet Mimku and Wasis on the beach. And there they built a big wigwam, and there they all lived for many, many happy years.